All right, I think we're going to get started, everyone. Hello, welcome. Did everyone enjoy the lentil soup? Yeah, I thought it was really great too. All right. And before we get started, we have some announcements coming up here. So who wants to go first? All right. And was anyone new the first time they've ever been here? Just one? Okay. And so are you familiar with the Live Lifestyle Medicine website? Did somebody show you that back there? Okay, she can fill you in the website, the class schedule, all the handouts, the lending library, where the bathrooms are, all the everyone else I guess is clued in, is keyed in. All right.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jamie, and I just want to let people know that we are doing a daily dozen challenge. And so the reason for doing this is to provide an extra layer of motivation to ourselves. And what we do with it is that we fill out the Daily Dozen app, which is Dr. Greger's app, which is you can go through Google Play and get online. And we will start on August 1st. It's a self reporting system, it's an honor system, and you can wager. So you can give yourself a little incentive to keep at it, and you can go for 1, 2, or 3 months, and I'll pass these around. And you can take one if you're interested.
Okay, I'm wearing my overalls today because tomorrow we're visiting the farm. And there's a number of people here that are going to be visiting the farm. Okay. So tomorrow at 11 o'clock, Scott has sent out the address. It's very easy. You drive down I-5, you get off at the Creswell exit, you turn right, you go through town, and then the speed limit through town is 25. And when you get to the county road, the speed limit is 40. And it's like a quarter of a mile past the 40-mile speed limit. So it's just through Creswell, and then you turn left down a very, very pitted road. And it's toward the end of the road. Your GPS will get you there. And the animals are very excited to meet you all. And I'm very excited that there's an interest in coming. So just thank you all for signing up. And if you haven't signed up and want to come, just come on along, because it's going to be on the weekends. They do a big welcome walk where there's like 30 or 40 people, but you're going to have your own private tour. And remember that she usually charges for this, and she's not charging. So if you'd like to make a donation to Welcome Home Farm Sanctuary on their site, that would be great, but it's not at all required. And it's on Hurlburt Lane. Yeah. And it's down toward the end. You'll see it. There's a sign. And yeah. Yes, this is Misty. She owns Romeo, who's in the Guinness Book of Records, and he is the world's tallest steer. And you get to meet Romeo and his brother Milo, who's only a scoot shorter than he is. And some of my favorite animals like Fred the goat and Figgy the turkey who purrs, and the new lambs. And then one little black one that we thought was a lamb, Saul, and it turns out he's maybe a pygmy sheep or something, because he's only growing out. He's not growing up. So, but they're all very sweet. So I'll see you tomorrow. Lambs. The lambs are babies. And we also have a little pygmy pig named Bella, who's very cute. So.
Okay, last announcement is first, I think we know the answer to this already, but so this is a pilot program of us doing the food samples at the beginning and the half-hour social hour. Should we continue for the next 13-week cycle? Okay. We thought that was the answer, but we weren't sure. So we do need help with other people. We'd like to build up a volunteer base for other people to make the sample and bring it in. And we will pay for the ingredients. So if you talk to Trish, if you're interested, we've got one volunteer who's going to demonstrate or give samples of her yogurt, her homemade yogurt, and then another person's going to do ricotta cheese sandwich spread. And perhaps we're not quite sure on that one yet, but and nobody has to, but And then, and we're looking for delicious, inexpensive, easy to make, and plant-based, of course. And you can run the recipe by Trish or I, and we can pick a date. We're pretty good for this 13-week cycle we're in, but for the next 13-week cycle, we love participation. It's fun. It's just, I'm not the greatest cook, even though everybody's saying what I've made is good so far. So I feel like, wow, cool. But and then Trish, was there one more thing I wanted to say? Oh, somebody's going to make hummus for us too. So, and then lemon cookies. Scott's wife is going to make us lemon cookies. Yum. So thank you very much for coming early and participating. It's really fun to have that half hour out there. So thank you.
So I don't for a change. Other than this week, we're going to be talking at Natural Grocers tomorrow on bone health. It's 2:30 to 4 o'clock. And then we have a class at Riverbend Annex on Thursday from 3 to 4:30. And so you're welcome to attend that if you're interested in bone health. I don't know when we're doing bone health in the evening, but it's not for a while. The other announcement is this coming Saturday. Not only is there Walk with a Doc from 9 to 10, but at 11 o'clock at the farmers market, Scott and I are going to be doing diabetes and why you want to come to the farmers market and buy foods that are going to help your diabetes. So we'll be doing a presentation from 11 to about 11:40, and then we're going to repeat it at 12 o'clock. If that's 11 o'clock is too early for you, you come to the second session. Anyway, and that's this coming Saturday. Yeah, it's on 8th Street.
Yeah.
We're gonna be serving tonight's lentil soup again.
And then, and if you're busy on Saturday, then next week's class, Charlie will be talking about diabetes. So there's lots of chances. And then the other thing, especially for the newer people, if you go onto the website at the bottom of the homepage, that's where the kind of the master template is of all the different classes. So the different locations, the different days, the different times. So just go to livelifestylemedicine.com, and at the very bottom, there's a whole schedule there you can see. So if it's hard, sometimes hard to keep up with all the things we got going on. It's a good thing you're well, kind of retired, right? But yeah. So Charlie's busy. So did everybody get the handout for tonight? Is there anyone that still needs one? No. Okay. So this is no PowerPoint presentation tonight. Charlie and I just like to just kind of make it an interactive Q&A, but we'll go through all of these on here, and you guys can start in whichever order you want. Down at the bottom, I have the kind of the recommended supplements there. I mean, supplements is one of the 12 nutritional myths on here, but you kind of like that's kind of the cliff notes of the supplements that we kind of recommend. But we can talk more about that. But yeah, you guys get to shout out and choose each one, and I'll give you my answer, and then Charlie can add in his 2 bits as well. So, what do you guys want to start with? Number 1, where do you get your protein? That's always the one, isn't it? Right. So I usually just kind of start out by saying, well, what is protein, right? So does anyone have any idea what it is and why it's important? Just shout out a few things. Any thoughts? Amino acids, right? Muscles, right? To build muscle. Brain function. Yes. So we need it. We need it. It's a vital nutrient. So we have 3 what are called macronutrients. So we have macro means we need a lot of it, right? So micronutrients like vitamins and minerals, those are micronutrients because we only need them in trace amounts, very small amounts. But macronutrients, we need them in large amounts. That's why they're called macro. And so we have technically 4. We have protein, we have fat, we have carbohydrate, and we have water. Water is technically a macronutrient because we need lots of it too, right? Like our body's like 80% water. So a lot of it. And so that's where we get our calories. We don't get calories from water, but we get calories from protein, fat, and carbohydrates. So That's the only sources of calories we get. And so protein's one of those macronutrients. So always the debate is, well, how much do we need? What, when it was first discovered, I think it was in like 1840 something, or maybe it was 17 something. It's an exact date now. But it's been on a pedestal ever since then. So you always hear people say, oh, protein is back or something. It's never really gone anywhere, right? So it's always been there. And so we need a certain amount of it. And so the recommended dietary allowance, the RDA, comes up with how much we need of all these different nutrients, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, everything. And so when they came up with how much. What it is. And as far as where it comes from, is all protein comes from plants, because only a plant can actually take nitrogen, which is what amino acids are. Amino acids are nitrogen-based compounds. So there's chains of these amino acids that have a nitrogen base to them. And only plants can take nitrogen from the atmosphere and create an amino acid. So all amino acids, and thus all protein, only comes from plants. There's no original source of protein from any animal or any other source other than plants. And so the only reason a cow or a pig or any kind of animal has protein in its muscles is because it ate a plant. So you have to eat a plant at some point to actually get protein. And so when we eat protein from any source other than plants, we're getting it secondhand. So you're getting it, some animal ate it, and then the protein from the plants, and then you ate the animal. That's how you got the protein. It all comes from that. So all proteins are in all plant foods are all complete. They have all of the amino acids in them. They have different amounts in each of the foods have different amounts of different amino acids, but they all contain all of the amino acids. The only food that is not complete in its amino acids are actually two. One is gelatin, which actually comes from an animal, and two is egg white. Albumin is what we call that, the egg white. That is missing some amino acids, and so is the gelatin. So if you try to eat nothing but gelatin and egg whites, you would be deficient in some of your amino acids. Whereas all plants have all the amino acids. And one of the I usually don't spend this much time on some of this detail, but I think it's so important because protein is the number one myth out there. Is actually Christopher Gardner. Christopher Gardner is a nutrition professor at Stanford, and I've seen him speak many times. And he actually came up with a whole chart, a color-coded chart of all the amino acids, and he compared it with a whole bunch of different plant foods and a whole bunch of different animal foods, a huge variety of all the different ones. And what was amazing was it was a graph that showed how much of the different amino acids each of the foods had, and different proportions and everything. But when you compared the plant amino acids with the animal amino acids, they looked almost identical. You couldn't even really tell them apart. And so the point of that laborious uh, task that he did was that, wow, look at that, all the plants have all the amino acids, just like all the animals except for the gelatin and the egg white have all the amino acids. So why are we even having this debate about, how much protein are we getting and what's the best sources of protein? And it's kind of like it's unnecessary. It's like, let's focus on things like fiber. Let's focus on what food packages we're getting our protein from and our carbohydrates from and our fats from. Why are we so worried about protein? Because a couple other tidbits from that same lecture is another way to look at it is, have you guys played Scrabble? Has everyone pretty much in here played Scrabble at some point? So you know how the letters, there's different amounts of different letters, right? There's more of a particular letter than another one. I haven't played it enough times to remember, but there's a certain number of L's and M's, and ones that are letters that are in words more frequently. There's more of those. And so he looks at protein like in the amino acids like a Scrabble game. It's like you only have so many letters, and so you just got to make sure you get all the letters to get all your amino acids. And some foods have more of a certain amino acid, some have less, but you can still, unless there's only a certain number of words you can do in a Scrabble game because you only have that many letters. But if you put 2 or 3 Scrabble games together, you could come up with a lot more words, right, in a game. And so he kind of shows it that way is a good way to look at proteins and amino acids. And you just need to, the general population doesn't need to worry about, am I getting all the right amino acids? If you just eat a wide variety of foods, even if it's only plants, you're going to get all the right combination of all the different amino acids. As long as you're not eating just 2 or 3 different foods, 24/7, 365 days a year, then you might get into some trouble because you'll still get all the amino acids, but you might be deficient in certain ones. And so that's why we always talk in this class about eating a wide variety, colors of the rainbow, eat a wide variety of whole plant foods, and you'll get all those amino acids. So that's one bit. And then another is that protein cannot be stored. So we can store fat, right? We all know that. So we eat extra calories, we eat extra fat, we store extra fat, right, in our subcutaneous tissue. We can store it. We can store carbohydrate. Carbohydrate gets stored as glycogen in your liver and in your muscles. And so you can store up to about over 2,000 calories worth of carbohydrate, glucose, in your muscles and in your liver. And so you have a storage depot for that. And then anything extra calories from even carbohydrate would get converted into fat as well and stored as fat. But can you store protein? Does anyone know the answer to that question? Can we store protein, excess protein? No, okay, I already did. Okay. So you cannot store protein. So I guess you're listening. So you cannot store protein. So any extra calories you get from protein. So just as a refresher, carbohydrate has 4 calories per gram. Protein has 4 calories per gram, and fat has 9 calories per gram. And so if you eat extra protein calories, you're just going to store it as fat also. Just like, because you can't store it as glycogen, although you can turn protein into gluconeogenesis, and you could turn extra calories from protein into sugar, but also into fat more easily. It's more easily done. So any extra calories you get from protein, so you see all these people that are, there's like cereal with added protein, and I saw a joke on TikTok. I don't know if anyone does TikTok, where it shows the women's bras with protein, with extra protein, and it's like just like these inanimate objects with protein. It's like, what? Because everyone's just going nuts about protein because it's just a marketing tool. And so any extra calories you eat from protein is just going to get stored as fat. So we can't store protein. So and then you always think about, well, I want to build more muscle. It's like, well, yeah, you can get more protein, but unless you do resistance exercise, you're not going to build more muscle. So just eating more protein does not promote muscle growth. It just gets stored as fat. And so you want to get enough calories, get enough protein so that you'll be able to build muscle as long as you're doing that resistance exercise to build up your muscles. So again, going back to the recommendations, 0.8 grams per kilogram or 0.36 grams per pound that already has a correction in it so that you will get enough. So that's really all you need. And then going back to, let's go back one more extra information about protein is that if you think about when's the time in your life you need the most protein. Anyone have a guess as to when you're a baby? Yeah, old age you need a little more, so that's correct. But when you're a baby, so the first 6 months of life, we double in weight. And so that's arguably the time in the life you need the most protein. And when you're older, it's true you don't absorb protein quite as well as when you were younger. So you might need a little bit extra. But that again, there's that correction in there with the zero 0.8. But sometimes you'll hear people say, well, maybe you should get 1 gram per kilogram just to play it safe and because you don't absorb it as well. And that's even unnecessary because there's already a correction in there. And just to kind of show you why it is so much more, the correction with the RDA at 0.8 is already overdoing it because the time in our lives we need the most protein is when we're a baby, the first 6 months of life. What's the perfect food for an infant the first 6 months of life? Breast milk, right? Does anyone have any idea what percent of the calories in breast milk are protein? Does anyone have a guess to that? How much? But no, but a good guess. Percent of calories, 5. It's actually about 6. Only 6% of the calories in human breast milk come from protein. So if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet and completely vegan, no animal products whatsoever, you're getting usually between 15 to 20% of your calories from protein. So things like spinach, almost 50% protein, beans, 20 to 40% protein, even potatoes are 10 to 15% protein. So all the plant foods, you're getting somewhere between 15 to 20% of your calories from protein, probably even a little higher if you're eating lots and lots of beans and nuts and seeds and things like that. And so that's twice as many percent of calories coming from protein in whole plant foods than in human breast milk. So in the time in our life we needed the most protein, we're only getting 6%, and that's the perfect food for the human baby developed over millions of years. And so it just kind of makes you go, yeah, why are we worried about protein? We only needed 6% when we were doubling in weight, and we're getting 10, 15, 20% of our calories from protein eating a whole food plant-based diet. So it just needs to be taken off the pedestal and just say, yeah, you got to pay attention to it. It's not like, you completely forget about it. It's just that you just have to kind of go, oh, well, I'm just going to eat a wide variety of whole plant foods. And even if, just because you come to class doesn't mean you have to be vegan, or you might still choose to eat some animal products. And that's, we've always said that in these classes where no one's judging you. We're not policemen. We're just we're just giving what the science shows, and you can make your own decision. And do you want to add anything about protein?
I just want to cover a couple points. One of them is to reinforce what Scott said. He had a really good explanation of all this. But some of you may still be in the back of your mind is lurking this, wait a second, isn't there something more valuable about animal protein? And don't you have to kind of combine foods, plant foods? Anybody heard that? Or and is that kind of going through your mind? Like, wait a second, I've been living in a cultural message that has been promoting what? Animal protein, animals for our protein source. Scott just finished telling you what? Plants have all the protein you need. And I just want to give you an image. Pretend I'm a plant. I'm a plant who's just sitting here in the sun. I can't move around much. And I grab that nitrogen from the air, and it's a gas. I split the molecule and I make every amino acid known to mankind. All the 20 amino acids that we need, even the 9 essential ones we need. Along comes some animal and eats me. What is that animal getting? They're getting not only those amino acids, but those amino acids are coming packaged with one other thing, and that's the deficiency in our diet. What is it? Fiber. Yeah. So the animal comes along and eats me and gets that fiber and builds their microbiome up, and they produce short chain fatty acids, butyrate, and whatever else they need for anti-inflammatory. But what happens to that fiber in the cow, in the pig, in the chicken? Where does it go? It gets metabolized and it's gone. So I want to make one last point to you all to drive this home. People ask me, how about, isn't something special about animal protein? And I say, yes, there are several things that are so special about animal protein. Number one, the animal protein that you get has zero fiber in it. That is not going to bring you health. Number two, those animal proteins that you get, if you get too much of that animal protein, it's hard on your kidneys and you wind up with decreasing kidney function. And number three, what's number three about animal protein? Dr. Clapper came and talked to us about that. It's the Red Sea tide of toxins. For those of you who got to hear his talk, if you didn't, you may want to read his book. When you're eating some animal protein, it comes packaged, especially when you heat it up with heterocyclic amines, things that age you, endotoxins. There's a long list of chemicals in there that are inflammatory, like free radicals, a long list of things that are cancer promoting or potentially DNA damaging. That is something so special about animal products that it may want to make you think, perhaps I'm going to get my protein from plants. And that's what I choose to do.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is about protein requirements or recommendations for as you're aging to prevent sarcopenia or treat sarcopenia. So sarcopenia means losing muscle. And so the only thing that's going to help with that is resistance exercise and then getting adequate calories. Because if you're getting adequate calories, you'll get adequate protein by default. Now, if you were you weren't, the problem with as we age is we tend to not eat as much food, so less active and not eat as much food, appetite sometimes goes down. So the people that struggle with sarcopenia the most, people that have had like cancer chemotherapy, they're chronically ill. So a lot of times when when you're chronically ill with diseases, you tend to lose your appetite. Medications we prescribe, basically just the treatment for a lot of chronic conditions lower your appetite and lower your activity. Those are both setups for sarcopenia, for muscle loss. And so we have the studies that show just increasing protein will not help build muscle or prevent sarcopenia. It has to be the resistance exercise. So somebody that comes to me that's like, well, I'm pretty inactive. This is all I can do right now. I got all these health conditions. And so I want to make sure I preserve the muscle I have. And what can I do? So then I'm not eating very many calories. I'm not eating a lot. And so then that's where you have to really be careful and really be selective which foods you eat. You want to make sure you're not eating a lot of empty calories. You're not eating processed foods because they've had all the fiber and most of the nutrients stripped out of them. So you don't want to be eating white bread, white rice, white flour pasta, chips, cookies, just junk food. You want to be eating, beans and intact whole grains, nuts and seeds, nut butters. So to get more calories in per bite. Same with children. It's the same way when Dr. Colgrove talks about, the pediatrician talks about the nutrition with children. It's very similar because their stomachs can only hold so much food. You can't just feed a spinach salad to a 3-year-old because that's not going to be enough calories. They're going to stuff their they only have so many stomachfuls a day. Same with an elderly person, only so many stomachfuls of food a day. So you have to be just more conscious about what food choices you're making to make sure that they're the highest in nutrients. You get enough calories per bite. So that's where, like on that traffic light handout in the back, out there in the social area, yeah, you'll see the green light, yellow light, red light foods. And so green light is all your unprocessed whole plant foods, fruits, vegetables, beans, intact whole grains. Whereas the yellow light foods are your avocados and nuts and seeds and nut butters and some pasta, some whole grain bread, because those foods are yellow light because, well, if you're trying to lose weight, you don't want to go too crazy on the yellow light. But if you're someone that's like a heavy exerciser or you're trying to gain some weight or gain muscle, then you might want to go a little heavier on the yellow light foods because you're going to get more nutrients, more calories per bite. Thus, more calories and more nutrients per bite equals more protein per bite as well. But you got to get that's helped to maintain your muscle. But then the only thing that's going to build muscle and to keep it from continuing to get worse is to get that resistance exercise in, even if you're just doing hand weights or whatever to build that, and chair squats or whatever to help maintain muscle and build muscle. One thing good about eating animals. Well, I mean, you guys remember our talk about what is the healthy food? Well, compared to what, right? So eating chicken or fish is still healthier than eating bacon, sausage, cookies, donuts. Those are all worse, right? So there's always going to be on a spectrum, least healthy choice to the most healthy choice. So to say is anything good about eating animals? Well, unless you're dependent on what you were eating before. So if you're just eating donuts and bacon double cheeseburgers all day, then eating some chicken or fish or something is still a better choice, but not as good of a choice as eating a unprocessed whole plant food. There's nothing. So the question being, there's really nothing good about it compared to a whole plant food. There's nothing, because you're not getting the fiber. You're getting all those pollutants and toxins, and Charlie also didn't. You could have mentioned IGF-1 as another one, cancer promoter. So animal protein is special that way too. Increases IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which is a cancer promoter. And so we need some, but we don't need too much. And so yeah, in the back. Yeah. So the point being made is that the animal products on the market today are not as healthy as they were maybe 100 years ago, and that I would say that's true. So they were getting, it's like if they're eating grass, they get more omega-3. It still doesn't make it a healthy food. It's less harmful and less pollutants and things. Now with our modern agriculture, CAFOs, they're confined animal feeding operations, and they're just getting them to market as fast as they can, and all the so eating higher on the food chain is where you're getting all the extra pollutants and things like that. So yeah. So the RDA is the same, but then RDA is the question was, is the RDA for protein the same amongst the lifespan? So there are, if you look up pediatric, elderly, there are different organizations put out different recommendations. So there is some slight changes, but I think the point is that and it's kind of like splitting hairs, because it's the RDA itself has already got a correction factor in it, and so there's a debate about, well, maybe tiny bit more when you're younger, tiny bit more when you're elderly. There's kind of a fair debate about that, but I think it still detracts from the point that most people are getting double, if not more, protein than they actually need, and it's actually not good for your health. It's actually worse for your kidneys, and So you want your plant, you want to get your protein from plants, and you can even get too much protein from plants. Um, one of the last conferences I went to in San Diego in May, a nephrologist did a talk, a kidney doctor, and he talked about even his patients that are ready to go on dialysis, ones that are really sick, have really bad chronic kidney disease. He even tells them not to eat too much plant protein either. It's like, no, you need to lower amounts of protein because it still causes hyperfiltration. It's still really hard on the kidneys. The plant protein is not as hard on the kidneys as the animal protein, is easier on the kidneys. So that's still a better choice, but you can even overdo it on plant protein. If you're putting like tons of protein powders in your smoothies and things like that, you can actually overdo it there too. Another question. We could spend the whole hour on just protein. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It was a revelation to me to understand where we digest protein, animal protein and fat versus plants in our gut, up and low. That was really interesting for me to learn.
Yeah, so there's it was the question or the statement was about where we digest things. It was a revelation, and it's sort of, it's not just the protein, it's everything. In animal cells, they have a cell membrane which is easily busted high up in the intestinal tract by the hydrochloric acid and the pancreatic juices, and the protein, carbohydrate, and fat get released up high, get absorbed up high. But then if you're eating plants, then they have cell walls. They don't have cell membranes. These cell walls are composed of fiber. The fiber is resistant to being broken down by the pancreatic juices and the hydrochloric acid. It has to be broken down low in your intestinal tract, in your microbiome. It's fermented, and then you get release of protein, carbohydrate, and fat in that area, which there are L cells. I call them lucky cells because they're lucky because you produce your own GLP-1, the weight loss and anti-diabetic medicines that you see on TV. You can make your own, but you have to stimulate the L cells. In order to do that, you have to have your foods fermented. And when you're eating processed foods and you're breaking up the cell walls, like making white flour to make the white bread or whatever, it's absorbed up high. You still have plenty of fiber, but you get absorption up high, so you don't get that stimulation. It's a very interesting science.
Yeah.
Can you explain how protein is related to collagen production within our body?
Well, collagen, it's a type of protein, but our bodies can't, like, it's like if you eat collagen, it doesn't necessarily become collagen. It gets all broken down into the component amino acids, and the body decides what proteins to assimilate and to make and where they go. So we can't really, although there are some studies, even Gregor had some recent studies on collagen that maybe it has some benefit, whereas before it was kind of just no, it doesn't have any benefit to take collagen. But it's still, with supplements, it's always going to be a crapshoot because it's like you don't know you're actually getting. It's not FDA regulated, so you don't actually know what's on the labels, actually what's in the product you're taking, and it costs a lot of money. So it's kind of, you're better off getting your nutrition from food rather than from supplements. So, with a few exceptions at the bottom there. And so it's kind of in that same category. But you can go on nutritionfacts.org and type in collagen. I think there were some fairly recent videos he did about that, about collagen supplementation. But as far as in general, just because we eat collagen doesn't mean you're going to suddenly put more collagen in your knees because you ate collagen. So the body decides where to distribute the proteins, assimilate. For collagen, yeah, because all plants are loaded with vitamin C, so you don't really need to take a vitamin C supplement because you're going to be getting plenty of vitamin C with eating plants. Because if you're eating like a carnivore diet, you're going to be probably need to take some vitamin C supplements, because if all you're eating is animals, you could be deficient in vitamin C and have a collagen disorder. Hair starts to fall out, and your joints start falling apart. So it's not good. But yeah, you get plenty of vitamin C just because plants are loaded with it. Yeah, yeah. Correct. It's our body.
I've heard of, like, say, spinach or kale, maybe you're able to digest more if it's slightly cooked rather than raw, or is that even a reality?
Yeah, the kind of the reality with the question being, comment being, does it matter if you eat it more raw or more cooked, like greens and things like that? The true answer is eat it however you'll eat the most of it, because it's because so it's it's, a lot of people say some raw, some cooked is probably good to get a little bit of both, but ultimately it's whatever will, yeah, like if you, well, I just don't like raw broccoli, but I'll eat steamed broccoli. Well, if you eat one floret raw, but you'd eat 10 florets steamed, then eat the 10 steamed ones, right? So that, and then just to give you a heads up, so the class we did last class cycle, we got through all of these actually. So if you, so what, obviously we're not going to get through all of them. So you can go to the class archives, the recordings of the last session, and you can go, oh, there's nutritional myths right there, and you could actually watch the full thing and get to all of these. If there's one on here we don't get a chance to, but let's move on to another one. Just some people might be, yeah. So yeah, I'm glad we spent the extra time on protein, because it's obviously the biggest myth. What's the next one? Number 8. What about organic and non-GMO foods? So this is another great one, because it's Charlie and I call these distractions a lot. And so it's kind of like, the analogies I like to use is, if somebody is, so I think of all these chronic diseases: diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, autoimmune disease, lung disease. I mean, everything I see all day long at work is like, those are chronic inflammation. The house is on fire, right? The patients that come in and see me, they got 20 things on their problem list. They got 20 medications. Their house is on fire. Their body, their house is on fire. Chronic inflammation. And so what they need is, lifestyle medicine, all 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. They need a more whole food, plant-based diet. If I can enact all 6 of those lifestyle pillars for that patient, that's like taking the Junction City water tower and just dousing the house fire, right? And so that's like number one. That's the most important thing. Now, having these debates about what about organic, what about GMO, non-GMO, I call those graduate level things. Those are garden hoses, right? So if the house is on fire and, oh, I'm gonna eat only organic produce, well, that's a garden hose. That's not a water tower. That's a garden hose. The difference between organic produce and non-organic produce, that's, yeah, the organic is better, but sometimes it's more expensive and some people can't afford it. And so the eating whole plant foods, even if they're not organic or non-GMO, that's still a Junction City water tower dumping on that house fire. Whereas the difference between the GMO and non-GMO, the organic and the non-organic, that difference is very small. It's like it's a 1 or 2 garden hoses, right? Versus the water tower. So yeah, organic is better because you're not gonna have the pesticides. But the other thing I always remind people with pesticides is, well, think of all the chemicals they're spraying on all these vegetables you're eating all day, every day. It's like, well, think about when you're eating a pig or a cow or a goat or a sheep, you're eating all of the pesticides, all the plants that they ate in their entire life. And that's been concentrated in their muscle, and you're eating their muscle. So you're eating higher on the food chain. The higher on the food chain you eat, the more toxins you get, the more heavy metals, the more pesticides, you're eating all the plants that animal ate to get to grow and to be that size. And so same with like large fish. So if you that's why eating algae from the sea, even though the sea is grossly polluted, the algae is less polluted than the smaller fish. That's why sardines have less pollutants in them, less microplastics, less heavy metals, less dioxins, methyl mercury. They have less of those pollutants than the swordfish or the sturgeon, right? Those fish have been are concentrated, because think of all the little fish that those bigger fish ate to get big, right? And so it gets bio amplified as you go up the food chain. And so eating plants, you're eating low on the food chain. So even if it's not organic, it's still going to be less pesticides than if you ate the animal products, just as an example. But then, yeah, the organic is better, because if you think about it, when we spray crops with pesticides, we're making them resistant to different diseases and bugs and pests and things. And so if we think about what micronutrients are, phytonutrients, so micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. We talked about that earlier. And so phytonutrients are thousands and thousands of phytonutrients. Phyto means plant, nutrients in a plant. Like when I read a textbook that was, sounds really boring, but it was like 14 years ago. It was a whole textbook. It was a graduate level nutrition textbook from Oregon State University. And it was all about phytonutrients and phytochemicals, basically the ins and outs of all of the discovered phytonutrients and phytochemicals. And these are little micronutrients in plants that are different from vitamins and minerals. And I remember when they first started studying them, they identified about 100 that were in a strawberry. Now there's over 1,000 have been identified in a strawberry. And so what those are, what we've learned that phytonutrients are they're the immune system of the plant. And so when you have an organic plant, it's more resilient, right? Because it's having to fight off pests and things on its own. It builds up its immune system to be resilient. And so you're getting more nutrients, more phytonutrients when you eat the organic produce. And whereas the sprayed ones that have been, Monsanto, and they've been sprayed and everything, they're not as they're resistant to certain things, but they haven't had to build up their immune system, so they're not as healthy. Same with GMO, non-GMO. It's kind of that same thing. So that's why it is better to get the organic and the non-GMO products for your health. But
I just have one statistic to add. When I listened to Dr. Greger at Roseburg when he came last time, he said if everybody in the world ate one extra serving of fruit or vegetable, conventional, not organic, just conventional, one extra serving a day, there would be 20,000 lives saved. If this was organic, it would mean that another 200 lives additionally would be saved. So his conclusion was, eat your veggies and fruit however they come. If you can't afford organic, eat them anyway. Don't not eat them because they're not organic, but like Scott said, healthier and better for our soil and other things to do organic.
apples and no chocolate bars. And the other is the what was I going to say? Um, having the soil too. It's kind of similar with the soil, and that's one of the ones on here. Is there's less nutrients in the soil now than there was say 100 years ago, but that means that now you got to eat 4 broccoli florets to get the same nutrients that you got from 100 years ago. So it's still it's still healthy either way. Yes. Oh, great. That was my other point I was going to bring up. Yeah, if you want to know which foods to get organic most important and which ones that it's not as important, there's something called the Dirty Dozen. So you can go online and Google it, Dirty Dozen, and that'll give you the 12 foods that are the most beneficial to get organic, because I know strawberries are on there because of the amount of pesticides that they get, whether they have a peel, like, banana doesn't matter as much because you're just peeling the peel off and eating it, right? And then there's the clean 15. So there's the Dirty Dozen and the clean 15, and that'll help you kind of, okay, I'll save money on buying regular on the clean 15, but I'll spend a little extra on the organic for the Dirty Dozen. So that's a good tip. Mhm. It's just gonna have less if it has a peel. Yeah. But a lot of foods, it's actually good to eat the peel, like a cucumber. A lot of the nutrition is in the peel, or just under. Like I know, like an avocado, you want to carve it out as close to the skin peel as possible, because a lot of the most nutrients are right just under the surface of the peel itself. With a lot of different fruits and vegetables, it's that way. So, do you want to jump to another one? Number 12, what about supplements? All right. So, number one is we talked about earlier that you don't want to get your nutrition from supplements because you can't trust them. And, they've done studies up to 40 to 50% of all supplements in the store. When you actually test them, they don't have what that says it has in it. And a lot of times they're contaminated with, like, there's been traces of statins found, cholesterol medication, statins, antidepressants found in supplements. And when because it's not FDA regulated, it can say whatever it wants and it doesn't have to have any of the product in it. And so luckily 40 to 50% do have what they have in it. So it's kind of just trial and error. Like for me, I don't have any specific brand. I mean, I've kind of picked, like, I think I use Nature Made on quite a few. You can look for third-party testing, which can help give you a little more confidence. But for me, it's just like, I'm taking this vitamin D and my level was low, and now I've been taking this dose of this vitamin. Now I checked my vitamin D level again. Now it went up. Okay, well, obviously has vitamin D in it. So same with like B12, and so it's that's kind of, you don't want to trust supplements. And I know the older generation is really, because they grew up in a deficiency disease culture, like beriberi and scurvy and pellagra and I mean, kwashiorkor is protein deficiency, but you don't even see that. Charlie and I, between the two of us, have been practicing medicine for 60 plus years and never once seen a case of kwashiorkor, of protein deficiency. It just doesn't happen. So then, yeah, if you grow up in that culture, then you tend to, I just want to get a little supplement to kind of, as a reassurance, as an insurance policy. So, the with children, it's a little bit. I mean, having fortified foods has been helpful, because sometimes, when you're younger, you might need a little bit extra of, some calcium or vitamin D for that matter, if you're not getting enough sunshine. And so there are situations where supplements can be helpful. And the ones that are on here are kind of the ones that don't have as much debate about them, like vitamin D, because we don't get enough sunshine here year round. Calcium, which you might see there, you only really need 600 to 800 milligrams. And so just eating whole plant foods, you're going to easily achieve that. So you don't really need to even take a calcium supplement. And one thing that's really important to talk about calcium is that, pretty much every country in the world only recommends 600 to 800 milligrams a day, whereas the United States recommends 1,200 milligrams a day. Does anyone have any guess as to why ours is twice as much as everybody else in the world? The dairy industry, exactly. They've lobbied for us to have 1,200. And so the other thing with calcium is, if you take a mega dose like the 1,200 milligram that most of your medical providers recommend for you, especially if you have osteoporosis, that actually has been shown to increase your risk of heart attack and stroke, because the large dose like that actually causes a hypercoagulable state in the blood. It causes the blood to clot more easily. And so the little bit that's in fortified soy milk or something like that, 2 to 400 milligrams, that's a little bit in some of the fortified foods, that's not going to cause a problem. But those big 1,200 milligram mega doses actually increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. So that's a caveat with calcium. B12 is definitely something you need, because B12 is made by bacteria in the soil. So that's the only original source of B12 is from bacteria in the soil. That's who makes B12. And it's really important for nerve function, cognitive function. So we really need B12. And so we used to get it from just drinking stream water, picking a carrot out of the ground, brushing it off and eating it. So getting a little bit of dirt in our diet is how historically we got B12. And so nowadays, because if you ate grass-fed beef, the cow eats some dirt with the grass, and so they get B12 from the dirt. And so then we can store a little bit of B12 in our muscle tissue. Usually about up to a 3-year supply of B12 can be stored in the muscle tissue. So then you eat that cow that's been storing up all that B12, you get the B12 that way. So again, just like protein, secondhand. Now, because most agribusiness, they do grain-fed animals, and so they actually supplement the grain with B12. So that's how the animals get the B12 now. So again, you're getting it secondhand. You can take the original source, and there's really no, really good, reliable source other than a supplement. So everyone should be taking B12, and the recommended doses are there. No, it's more. So when you're older, so it's when you're under 65, it's 2,000 micrograms once a week. And then if you're over 65, it's 1,000 micrograms every day. And the reason is because we only absorb about 1% of the B12 that we take as a supplement. And the other thing that even people that are eating animals usually need B12 supplement too. I check people all the time and they're B12 deficient because so many of my patients are taking like Prilosec, the acid reflux medications, because that suppressing stomach acid decreases your B12 absorption. And so a lot of my patients that have heartburn, they're eating, standard American diet, and then they are not absorbing B12 very well even though they're getting it from the animals they're eating, they're not absorbing enough of it because they've suppressed their stomach acid so much because they have such bad heartburn. And so it is really important to take B12. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. So the question or the comment was that B12 is a water soluble vitamin. So the B vitamins are water soluble. So you just pee out the extra. And B12 also you pee out if you take too much. It's hard to get too much. And so you can build up pretty high levels. And there are some studies that show people can actually get tingling and paresthesias when they take too much B12. And then if you do B12 injections, that's been shown to cause acne. So there can be problems with taking too much, but we do seem to be able to store a little bit in our muscle tissue with B12 specifically. I don't know about other B vitamins. I don't know the answer to that, but yeah, in the back. So the comment is if you need to absorb it under the tongue. So if most people, if they're not having to take an acid reducing pill like Prilosec, they can just swallow it. It'll absorb just fine. Some people, like if they've had gastric bypass surgery, stomach sleeve, some sort of weight loss surgery, they don't absorb it very well. Or if they're on a GLP-1 because Ozempics and things like that, where sometimes that affects absorption. So then those people might have to take it under the tongue to get better absorption. Or if again someone's on an acid pill, or if they've had some of these types of weight loss surgeries, and then some people even have to do injections as well. But again, that can cause acne. But yeah, so most people, the general population, can, if they're not on an acid reducer, can just swallow it. But if you want to do a sublingual one under the tongue, that's fine too. And it's really important because if you're B12 deficient, not only can you develop dementia and neuropathies, the numbness, tingling in your fingers and toes, things like that, but it actually raises something called homocysteine. So homocysteine is, if it's in high levels, causes inflammation in our arteries. And so there was a study actually that, I don't know if you guys heard about it, where the vegetarian group in a big population study, they actually had more strokes than the people that weren't vegetarian. And Dr. Greger did a series of videos on that, and they tried to figure out what was causing that. And when they dug deep enough, what they found out was the people that were vegetarian and vegan, they were deficient in B12. So their homocysteines were elevated. And so that increases your risk of heart attack and stroke. So you could ruin a really good whole food plant-based diet by being B12 deficient, causing your homocysteine to be high, causing inflammation in the arteries. So it's really important to take B12.
We were looking for supplements last year sometime, and we discovered in going through all of her different type of supplements that she was getting excess amounts of synthetic B12, consuming 37,000 daily percent per day.
Oh, yeah.
And but it was cyanocobalamin.
So,
What are the effects of the toxicity?
Yeah, so cyanocobalamin is the one that Gregor recommends just because it's the most studied one. So there's nothing wrong with methylcobalamin, and there's different forms of B12, but you just recommend sinocobalamin because it's the most studied as far as effects on health and things like that. But like I mentioned earlier, you could technically get too much B12, and it could cause its own symptoms. So you want to make sure you don't, overdo it. And you can check the levels. You can do a B12 blood test, but the B12 blood tests tend to be unreliable, and they're learning that more and more as time goes on, which is why the most accurate test for B12 deficiency is something called MMA, methylmalonic acid. And so that's the most, because that'll be elevated. MMA will be elevated if you're B12 deficient. If your homocysteine's elevated, you can be either B12 deficient or folate deficient. And so, but if you're eating a plant-based diet, you're not going to be folate deficient, because that's what foliage is. Folate is foliage, plants. And so we do. These are all the ones to supplement. B12 is very important to supplement. And then the D3, we didn't talk about that. We did kind of talk about that because we're not getting enough sunshine. The calcium we talked about, the B12. Iodine, the RDA is 150 micrograms. And so you want to make sure you're getting that either from iodized salt. If you're trying to avoid salt, then you don't want to add a bunch of table salt. Then you want to either get it from a supplement, or you can get it from sea vegetables, things like nori, wakame. I don't know if you want to talk more about that. Dulse, wakame, yeah. So you can get iodine from there as well. And so, but that's an important one, because if you get too much iodine, it can suppress your thyroid, cause a goiter. If you get too much or too little, it can cause thyroid, because your levothyroxine, your natural synthroid, your natural thyroid hormone is made of iodine. And so you can of iodine. So you could get too much or too little iodine and cause a problem with your thyroid and cause a goiter. So that's important. And then the DHA EPA is the one that's a little bit more of a debate about. So that's your long chain omega-3 fatty acid. So, some people in the nutrition expertise area field recommend it. Some don't, because actually the DHA EPA supplements can actually cause your blood to get too thin and cause you to bleed more easily. It can actually suppress your immune system, and it's actually also associated with higher risk of atrial fibrillation. So that's a heart arrhythmia. So it's a lot of, so I don't take that supplement, but some people do, and doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just, the most important thing is to get plenty of short chain omega-3 from plants. So those are your chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts. That's the short chain omega-3, which your body then converts to long chain EPA DHA. And so some people don't convert it as well, but the main thing that causes you to decrease your conversion is high omega-6 fatty acids. So omega-6 is also an essential fatty acid, but that's what you find in, like, cookies and pastries and kind of all those added oils to processed foods. Those are high in omega-6, and omega-6 suppresses your body's ability to convert from a short chain omega-3 to a long chain omega-3. And that's, fish do have long chain omega-3, but again, you can't just eat fish, say, oh, I want to get my long chain EPA DHA, I'll eat lots of fish. Well, yeah, you get that good component of the fish by eating that, but then you're getting the cholesterol, you're getting the saturated fat, you're getting the microplastics, you're getting the methylmercury, the dioxins. So foods come as packaged deals. We can't eat nutrients in isolation. We eat food. We don't eat supplements. We don't eat nutrients. We eat food. And so getting your nutrients from food is the most important thing when it comes to supplements, but with some of these exceptions. Yeah. Okay.
And probiotics.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about that with your fiber? And the difference between prebiotics and postbiotics, probiotics.
Are the bacteria in your microbiome, and there are the prebiotics, which is their food. So what is the food of the probiotic? It's the deficiency in our diet. So if we're not eating enough fiber, we are not improving our microbiome bacteria. In fact, we could take if you had a superior probiotic filled with different kinds of bacteria to repopulate your colon in the microbiome low down, you might have those bacteria that are saying, oh, we've got a new playground here. But after what, a few days, if you're not feeding them enough fiber, what happens? They die. If you're not feeding them their food. So you can get all the probiotics you need in a variety of fruit, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. And you populate it up, and there are actual studies that show that if you kill all the bacteria in your microbiome in your intestinal tract with antibiotics, the fastest way to populate it, we're going to talk about in just a second. But the slowest way can be taking those probiotics that are being so promoted. It can take weeks to a couple months to repopulate your colon. And the reason why is you have certain groups of bacteria that are involved in this probiotic preparation. They take up residency, and when you are trying to repopulate with the normal bacteria, they are warring with each other and fighting, and it takes a longer time for your good bacteria to repopulate itself. If you just eat your normal food after taking the antibiotics, you repopulate after close to around a week. The fastest way is if you were smart enough and you could think about this enough, you would take a sample of your stool and you'd put it in a capsule, because they showed when that was done and you ingest that after you wipe out all the bacteria, within a day or two, you are back to normal by just introducing the bacteria normally. So, am I a big fan of probiotics? Not really. There are certain conditions. There's C. difficile treatment. Young kids in the nursery sometimes need them. But for the average public, probably best to just eat real food.
And for C. diff colitis, C. difficile, they actually are doing some of the best studies are being done are stool transplantation. So actually, yeah. So they actually take a syringe, you're upside down, and they squirt stool into your colon, and it repopulates. And that's been shown to be the best treatment for C. diff colitis. So yeah, so it's all about the microbiome. Yeah, yeah. Right. So the comment was changing the microbiome in 2 weeks. So if you take someone that's eating a plant-based diet, like I think it was an African study. So they took the Africans from the continent of Africa, were eating mostly 80 to 90% plant-based diet. They took looked at their stool and their microbiome, moved them over to the United States, fed them kind of an African American diet, and their microbiome completely changed in 2 weeks. And it's because and it had even more to do, not just the fiber, it was also because they were eating, I think in that particular study, I remember they were eating just as much meat in Africa as they were in the United States, but they were still eating so much more fiber that they still had the healthier microbiome. But Charlie has a whole class on fiber, which you'll definitely stay tuned for that.
One last comment. Postbiotic are we have this symbiotic relationship with the bacteria in our microbiome. If we feed them their food, they feed us back chemicals. That's postbiotics. Those chemicals are butyrate, which cut down on inflammation. Inflammation is one of the underlying root causes of so many of our chronic illnesses. they also, in our microbiome, 70 to 90% of our serotonin, that feel-good hormone, antidepressant, anti-anxiety hormone, is produced. If we've starved our microbiome, not enough fiber, we are at more risk for anxiety, depression. And last of all, serotonin is a precursor of melatonin, our sleep hormone. If we don't have enough serotonin, it can interfere with our sleep.
What do you want? Another one? We got time for another one. Yeah.
Liquid oil.
Yeah. So number 6, I thought olive oil was healthy.
Like, I have a husband that needs to gain weight.
Yeah.
I have to watch oil and fat and all that, but I love somebody that I want to keep weight on him. So I like using oil sometimes, and mostly when I'm making nut butters. And I've come to putting MCT in it because I burned out a couple blenders, it gets to the point where it needs help, it needs oil. So I use MCT, but I don't really know if that's
Yeah.
the one to choose. So I'm really wondering if we have to use oil
Yeah.
once in a while.
So the question about number 6 about oil. And so oils are all processed food. So it's going to be, okay, well, what, is one better than the other? And well, yeah. So the oils you want to for sure avoid are, well, we don't have to worry about trans fats anymore because that was like Crisco and things like that. That's the worst fat. And so that's been outlawed from the food supply. The only way you get any trans fat naturally now is eating animals. They have some trans fat in them. And so that's the only way. So then that's the very worst of the fats. And then next worst would be any of the tropical oils. So coconut oil, palm kernel oil. Those are the tropical oils that are really high in saturated fat, cause inflammation, actually the worst, besides the trans fat. And then you go down to you hear about the seed oils and stuff. And those are made from plants, of course, and olives, right? So seed oils would be the next worst, and then the best would be like olive oil or avocado oil, things like that. But it doesn't make it a healthy food. And so it just means, because it's not a food, it's processed. So you just you stripped out all the fiber, all the nutrients. There's maybe some trace minerals left behind, and all you got left is liquid fat, and it's just 9 calories per gram. It's 2,800 calories or 4,000 calories per pound. We're going to talk about calorie density in a couple weeks, and we'll learn all about that for weight management. And so it's just a processed food. So if you're trying to gain weight and trying to get the healthy fats the best you can, then eat more avocados, eat more olives, eat more nuts and seeds, because you're still going to get tons of fat, tons of calories, but it's still going to have the fiber. It's going to have all the nutrients. And so that's the best way to do it. But if you're like, well, 100%, I'm not going to get, I've made my decision 100%, I'm not going to get rid of oil 100%, then you make the best choice that you can, which would be like the olive oil. And so, because that's the lesser of the evil, right? And so food is always going to be healthy compared to something else, like we talked about earlier. And so olive oil is healthy compared to coconut oil, but olive oil is not healthy compared to eating an olive, right? And so it's always going to be, it comes from coconut, right? And so it's gonna be, it's still gonna have tons of saturated fat. It's gonna still cause inflammation. So coconut oil, you can rub it on your skin, but don't ingest it. And so that's kind of where it's at with oil. Oil is just a processed food. It's the junk food of fat. Just like, if you chewed on a sugar cane, that would be the best way to eat sugar. But if you take a sugar cane or a sugar beet and you cook it, refine it down to this white crystalline powder, now it's just pure sugar, just pure glucose, right? And so obviously the sugar cane was healthier than the white refined sugar. Same thing with olives and olive oil. It's like one is processed, one is not processed. So you kind of always have to look at things from that realm. And there was an interesting lecture also at that conference I was at in San Diego in May. They actually did a deep dive in the seed oils, because you hear the current administration talking about eating beef tallow, avoiding the seed oils, all this kind of stuff. That's been the big villain. And they actually did a deep dive into the into the literature on seed oils, and found that actually they're reduce your risk of death compared to other foods. And so So the whole seed oil thing, yeah, it's still 100% processed fat. It's not doesn't make it a healthy food, but it's still healthier than doing the coconut oil or and actually in that particular study, what they showed was foods that contained even some of the processed foods that contained the seed oils actually, so they were left of the curve as far as there's a middle line where if you're above the line, it increases your risk of death from any cause. So it's something called all cause mortality. So to the right of that line, above the positive on that line, that means it increases death from any cause, all cause mortality. If it's to the left of the line, below the line, it reduces your risk of death from any cause, all cause mortality. And even foods that were completely processed, but and even had some seed oils in them, they were still below the curve. So they actually reduce all cause mortality. Whereas the most consistent foods that were to the right of the curve that increased all cause mortality were processed meats and sugar sweetened beverages. So those were the two worst. So bacon, sausage, hot dogs, processed meat, and sugar sweetened beverages were all the most death causing foods, not even processed foods with seed oils. And here they're saying, oh, eat lots of meat. Red meat was also above increased risk of all cause mortality. So not as much as the processed meat or the sugar sweetened beverages, but so thinking that, okay, I want to eat only foods that lower my risk of death, then you not want to eat the meat and the processed meats and the sugar sweetened beverages, and you want to even go lower. Bigger bang for your buck is unprocessed whole plant foods again. But even the point I'm making is that even the vilified seed oils in a processed food that you wouldn't necessarily consider healthy coming to these classes are still much better than those other foods I just mentioned. So just something else to take to the bank. Yeah. So ghee is clarified butter, so that's also very inflammatory, saturated fat, something to avoid. No, no. So it's yeah. I know. I had a good friend. He moved to Florida, but he was a cardiologist here in town. He was an interventional cardiologist, and he took care of my father-in-law. And he grew up in India, and he's like, oh, and he went completely plant-based. But he's like, oh, I got to get rid of the ghee. It's like that's my hardest thing. And because his cholesterol is still high and everything, and I think he finally got rid of the ghee, but growing up with Indian cooking, that was a hard one for him, but yeah, yes. hmm Beef tallow, yeah. It's just there is nothing good about it. It's just something it's just in vogue. I mean McDonald's French fries, I guess, have beef tallow in them. So even though I could technically eat French fries, it would be vegan, but not McDonald's ones because they fry them in beef tallow. And so because it's just this thing, it's like, oh, saturated fat doesn't matter. Coconut oil is healthy. Beef, eat bone broth, beef tallow. It's just like what's the thing that's in vogue. They're just trying to sell products. It has nothing to do with good science. It's just what a lot of these authors and sometimes they'll do when they write about like these people that write about nutrition books and things. They'll take something that's a seed of truth and like, oh yeah, that particular study or that particular thing is true, but then they extrapolate that and then they just because no one's going to sell millions of copies of eat more broccoli. I mean that's not going to sell, but eating beef tallow and eggs are back and butter is back and all these things, these headlines, it's all just trying to sell products. And even people that aren't selling things, just like influencers on social media, they're just trying to get hits, and they're not going to get hits by, oh, eat a more plant-based diet. That's not going to create hits on your, if you're an influencer, not as much as other things. But uh, coconut milk would also be bad because that's saturated fat from the coconut. So you don't want to overdo it on coconut either. Even if you're eating coconut meat, that's the better form of something. It's not, at least it's not processed, but it's still going to have a lot of saturated fat. And what saturated fat does is it blocks your liver's ability to get rid of cholesterol. So it actually raises your cholesterol. And so is it for you or from the chat? Okay. Yeah. Correct. Seed oils decrease your chances of death from any cause, but it doesn't mean it doesn't make it healthy, right? It's just, it's like it's always going to be compared to something else, right? And so, yeah, it was really, I can't remember who did the study, but I've seen the whole big chart on it presented multiple times from nutritional scientists that all these different foods that either increase, decrease all cause mortality, also death from heart disease, death from diabetes or developing diabetes, all these things, and it's falling along the same pattern. And so it's the foods, you know, that some people are telling you to eat, or actually that the science doesn't support. Actually, it's going to worsen your health, and that's why we talk about in these classes all the time. Is, you know, who do you trust? That's why we go to nutritionfacts.org. If you have any questions about anything nutrition related, type it in the search bar. You'll see articles, videos. It's all, and there, definitely watch his. I have it on our website, livelifestylemedicine.com. On the videos section, there's a couple of videos there about pulling back the curtain on how they create the videos and stuff on nutritionfacts.org. And so it's, you got to know where to go to get your information and who to trust, not just some random book, because there's always going to be a new book out that's just trying to sell copies. And it's, again, sometimes it's got a little bit of good science in it, but then they run with it, and then you just like, then you're like, well, who do I believe? It's kind of like another analogy I gave, like to give with, I had a whole class about nutritional myths and stuff that was different from this one, but where it's kind of like saying, so I don't know if anyone in here is an NFL football fan, just for example. So back when Bill Belichick was coaching the Patriots and they won all these Super Bowls, right? So I used the analogy then because everyone knew who Bill Belichick was or is. And so tons of Super Bowl wins, and so kind of one of the goats of coaching NFL football, right? And so it'd be like saying, okay, so when you compare someone like T. Colin Campbell or Dr. Greger or Dr. Esselstyn or some of these people, I would say T. Colin Campbell would be the best example. So T. Colin Campbell writes a book like the China Study, decorated nutritional scientist for decades. He's like the Yoda, the so-called Yoda of nutrition. And so he writes a book, and you read it, and you go, okay, that all sounds good. This looks like good. Here's all the references. Here's everything. Or even Dr. Greger, even though he's not coming up with an original idea, it's just here's all, his How Not to Die book has got 3,000 citations in it. And it's like, so, okay, so here's T. Colin Campbell or Dr. Greger with all these citations, and you read those books, and then you go, oh, now I'm going to read Grain Brain or Wheat Belly or Plant Paradox or some of these other books out there. And you read that and you go, well, that's conflicting with what T. Colin Campbell's saying and Dr. Greger's saying. And so who do I believe? Oh, well, this paradox one sounds better to me. It's more in line with the foods I like to eat, and I'm just going to go with that. And so doing that is like the same thing as saying, okay, so I watch a lot of football. I watch a lot of college football, NFL football. Does that make me a coaching football expert or a coaching expert? Does that qualify me to go coach the New England Patriots? No, not even the slightest. And so that's like so basically Bill Belichick is T. Colin Campbell and Dr. Greger. I'm just some guy that watches lots of football, and I could write a book about coaching football. And you might read my book and say, well, he sounds good. He seems knowledgeable in football. I'm going to believe him. Oh, I don't care about Bill Belichick. Yeah, he won a bunch of Super Bowls, but this guy sounds like he sounds good too. So who do I believe, right? And so it's the same exact thing. So someone that's got decades of research and academia, nutritional science, all behind them for decades, and you read that book, but then you read a book that conflicts with it, you have to understand what's the source. Who am I choosing to believe? And that's why we have these classes, so you can know who we believe and and it's not just based on belief, it's based on what's the science say, and you back that up. Because, I used to be a low carb guy. I did my master's thesis in PA school on low carb diets. Like, this is like 22, 23 years ago. I was a low carb guy. I read Atkins' book. I followed a low carb diet for 3 years. It seemed good to me, and yeah, there was some short term studies that looked good, and now, but that was my belief based on what I knew at the time and what I saw, and so then as time went on, then when I my story and I got into nutritional science and actually studied the nutritional science, I realized, oh, that wasn't such a good idea. That wasn't good. So I changed my beliefs based on what I learned. And so I think, we're always learning and learning new things. And so I think that's really important to, when we go over all these nutritional myths, is knowing who to trust, who to believe, where you get, what sources are you using, right? Yeah. No, I'm good. You're good. Okay. Yeah. 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 That's the plant paradox, Dr. Gundry. You're right. Yeah. Yeah. The very first citation was bogus, right? In the book. Right. It said exactly the opposite of what he said in the book. Because people don't expect people to actually look up the sources. So you cite a source and then you go actually read the study that it was pulled from, and it doesn't say what he said it said in the book. It's like, so Dr. Greger went to the very first citation of Plant Paradox, Dr. Gundry's book, and it said exactly the opposite of what the study he cited said. And so you kind of lose all the credibility right there. Doesn't mean every source was bogus, but it's like, how do you trust, when you're not even saying what's going to be. Right, right. And he takes the seed of truth, like, okay, lectins, too much lectins can cause inflammation in the body, and so you probably should avoid lectins. And so, but then it doesn't pass the sniff test, because the sniff test is, well, what are some of the highest foods in lectins? And he's saying you should avoid beans. Well, okay, well, that doesn't pass the sniff test, because what's the one food all the blue zones have in common? The healthiest, longest lived populations on the planet eat lots of beans. So it already doesn't pass the sniff test. It's like, so you already got to be like, well, what? And then the next red flag is he was selling supplements that are lectin blockers. So you could spend hundreds of dollars a month on lectin blocker supplements. And so it's like, so it's just not, he takes a seed of truth, but then, when you eat beans, you cook beans. And so when you cook beans, it inactivates the lectins. And lectins are actually good in small amounts. You just don't want too many. So you don't want to chew on raw kidney beans, that you'd get sick. And so, but you want to, eat lots of beans, but you want to cook them. So it's just, those are just examples of that. And we are out of time, but next week is diabetes. And yeah, again, to get to these other ones that we didn't get to, go to the class archives, and it's on the top tab up there, class archives. You have to click a few places to get to the archives, and then you scroll back and you'll see the nutritional myths um, class, and you'll find it, and you can watch the recording, and so you can get to all the other ones that we didn't get to today. All right. Thank you, guys. Great questions.